Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I am your stylish scientist, Professor Peter Jonason, and today we're going to return to our section on um, the being a samurai of science. And in this section, what we're trying to do is cut through some of the bullshit. Lots of bullshit is portrayed in the scientific community, of course, and that is often compounded in the non-scientific community in making it even more bullshitty. And the bullshit I want to talk about today has to do with happiness. Before we could talk about happiness, though, we need to agree on a definition. This is one of the fundamental points of disagreement among people, is that they don't share what the definition of what they're talking about is, and they assume that people have the same definition in mind, that whatever I think happiness is, you think happiness is. And so we have this problem of not talking to one another at all. And so let's start with, what do we mean by happiness? Well, there's two ways you can think about happiness generally. Happiness can either be a state, right, which is something that's triggered, like it's very fleeting, temporary, right? Like I feel happy. I saw a funny joke, right? Pedro did something really silly. I took a drug, even. Maybe I heard a funny joke from Bill Maher on his show that I just watched a bit ago. And this kind of approach, this state approach, it suggests that emotions are signals to the world about our internal states, like anger, for instance, right? Anger is a very important emotion to detect. And so if I show signals of anger on my face, it's a warning signal to the rest of the world to say, hey, stay away. Indeed, people can detect anger in people's faces much farther away than they can detect happiness. And we'll get to maybe why that might be the case in a little while. But more or less, these are triggered things from environmental contingencies. And this is similar to Paul Ekman's work, where he identified discrete kinds of emotions. So that word discrete is important. So it's happiness is an emotion, sadness is an emotion, right? They're a categorical, and it's not a quantitative approach. That's where we go next. The quantitative approach is much more reminiscent of a trait model, right? So that happiness would be a trait. And researchers have come up with all kinds of cute ways of calling this, right? Whether it be the satisfaction of subjective well-being, life satisfaction. There's even a scale called the PANAS, positive affect, negative affect scale. This research is almost entirely self-report in nature. It's sometimes even relying on a system that I've used and I've had students use. For instance, we used it in this paper here. Jordy and I did. I have another paper under review now with the amazing Cassidy Petrino, where we need to hear back about using this. It's called affective forecasting. Imagine, right? Imagine this happened to you, right? And then how would you feel, for example? But either way, these researchers suggest that happiness is dispositional. It's stable. It might even be genetic, right? And this is where you get research or talk about, does happiness relate to how much money somebody has? Yeah, and so it's usually subjective well-being being assessed across countries and looking at how the country, let's say GDP, relates to national averages in happiness, as an example, right? And of course, it does, right? Being happy does translate with more, having more money does translate with more happiness. And again, we'll come back to why that might be the case in a little while. But a conceptual question you have to wrestle with is that whether or not happiness is an actual positive state, right? Is that what happiness is? Or is happiness the aversion or the minimization, right? The absence of feeling bad, right? So I'm not a particularly happy guy. Like, I'm not walking around smiling, stupid, all this type of stuff, especially here in Poland where smiling is not allowed, right? It's somehow a bad manners to smile, right? But I'm not sure. I don't think I have many negative feelings either. My life is good. I have my dog. I have my amazing clothes. I get to talk to you here, right? I live in the city I want to live in. Great, right? Do I have to be raw like a cheerleader, smiling all the time, like my friend Paul, who's extremely happy all the time? I'm not sure if that's the case, right? And so when someone asks me, am I happy? I say, no, but I don't think I need to be happy. I'm happy to have my needs met and I'm content, right? So again, we get to this definitional problem. Yeah? How, though, do we advise people typically, and how do we pursue in our day-to-day lives being happy, right? Well, the first one is the distraction mode. And the distraction mode is the one that comes with the most negative side effects, as you can imagine. Our addiction to our phones is part of this dopaminergic system being capitalized in our brain to say, give me sugar, give me food, give me sex, give me drugs, right? It's an addictive kind of state. And you pay the piper later. The other, a more stable, a slower approach to happiness, if you will, is one of, let's call it purpose, right? That is, this is not, I'm not trying to be hippie about this, right? Like loving yourself, is just, it's a bit like masturbation, right? Like it actually has more damaging consequences to engage in this kind of self-love behavior. Now, you shouldn't hate yourself, obviously, right? But there's a difference between not hating yourself and loving yourself, all right? So loving yourself seems to increase narcissism, and this is a problem. And so the West is obsessed with self-love, and self-love equals narcissism. The purpose you should seek, the purpose we know that is better is, for example, raising children, right? Forming social connections, like making friends, right? You look at this with aged people. Old people are happier when they have more social connections. They're not even more happier, they're not even only happier, they're healthier as well. We are an ultra social species that needs social interaction to be healthy. Another way, of course, of being happy is simply pursuing health, right? People who are unhealthy are more likely to be unhappy. Now, this is correlational, of course, right? We don't make people sick in a lab and measure their happiness, but it can even be a bizarre surprise to you that if I have to go to the doctor every 5 days and I have some ailment, that's some bone that's bothering me or something, I'm going to be less happy than if life's great, right? So for right now, I have a bit of tennis elbow in this elbow. As you see, I'm kind of working it out. It makes me a little less happy than I was 2 weeks ago when I didn't have it. And if you want to know how I got it, don't be all X-rated about it. How many times can you do this and this at the gym before these kinds of repetitive stress injuries occur, right? So, but I think this industry and this conceptualization of what to do to be happy is not only very mechanistic. It's like, oh, if you want to be happy, do this, right? I think it misses the forest for the trees because it doesn't get us to the real question of why does it even matter? Like, why do we want to be happy? Right? What is happiness for example, in the animal kingdom? Right? I think it's very superficial to simply say, well, people want to be happy because it feels good. Okay, well, the question then is, well, why does it feel good? What is happiness providing for us in a deeper sense? And this is where I like to look to, for example, one of my favorite animals, a lion. I mean, Pedro's a good example here too, but imagine a lion. If a lion could be happy, what would make a happy lion, right? A lion would be safe, right? So they wouldn't have predation. It would have lots of food, and it would have its social group, right? It's pride, if you will, right? And so if you can picture a happy lion, it's that lion in the sun with a big fat belly laying upside down baking, right? That is, if lions can be happy, that's happiness in lions. Why? Because the lion will have satisfied its fundamental motives, right? Its fundamental drives in the world, right? So a conceptualization that might be useful here for us to talk about would be what's called the fundamental social motives framework. And this is a framework that's meant to be a revision, an evolutionary psychology update of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as you see here. Yeah? There are about 7 fundamental social motives, depending on how you read the articles. And I think they boil down to, like the fast approach to finding happiness and the slow approach, really a slow approach to happiness and a fast approach to happiness, evolutionarily speaking, right? And so what this does is these motives drive us to satisfy particularly adaptive needs, and the satisfaction of those needs is likely to make us happy, right? And so what the two primary motives of an organism is to survive and reproduce. The survival ones are the slow motives. These are things like avoiding diseases, protecting your family, keeping the romantic partner you have happy, that they want to stay with you, mate retention, it's often called. And of course, more generally, just staying safe, avoiding dangers, right? And so these are what I would call the slow motives. The fast motives are probably what you can imagine: status seeking and mate seeking. Also fundamentally important, right? You need status for building a nice house. You need to find a romantic partner to make babies and even satisfy your love needs and your investment needs and your purpose needs potentially, right? But when I've done some what's called factor analysis kind of on the side, playing with data, there seems to be a pattern in this fundamental social motives framework of there being two overlying and of course correlated dimensions, slow motives and fast motives. And so my suggestion for you here is that if you pursue these as ways of finding happiness, right, this will be more powerful in generating happiness than one doing things opposed to that, like going against those motives, right? Because I'm suggesting that your biology and psychology is designed by natural selection to want you to do those things, even if you're not consciously aware. And so doing those things satisfies. You might not be aware that you're doing those things. You might not think of getting, going on a date as mate seeking. You might not formally see it that way, or going to the gym formally as a way of being healthy. But they are underlying motivated by this. So satisfying these fundamental social motives, I think, will lead to more happiness. If you break them down, though, even more, the slow motives are mostly about avoiding risk. The fast motives are about seeking reward. And so we have to kind of balance this game a little bit. But our biology and our psychology is designed more to fixate on avoiding risk. So happiness in this way is best satisfied by pursuing these avoiding risk motives. So I like to call it there's 4 S's to life. 3 of them are safety, stability, security. And pursuing those allow you to avoid risk. Because it's great to be happy, but you can only die once. Right? And so natural selection, as revealed by theories like signal detection theory and error management theory, says that we're tuned in a way to over focus on the downsides, the risks of things, right? Because if you're walking through the woods and there's a rustle in the bush and you think, let me go look what that is, and it's a lion and he eats you, well, you're dead, right? You do not make babies, you do not collect $200 in Monopoly when you pass go. If you are automatically afraid and you run away, if the fact that it's a rustle in the bush and it had nothing to do with a lion, it was just wind, you're good. You just lost a few calories, right? So this asymmetry is why I think human beings are more likely to be happiest if they pursue slow, right, risk-averse pathways to happiness, right? The 4th S, of course, is sex, or sexiness. And I don't mean just sex, I mean sex, status, power, dominance, all that kind of. These are important qualities. We need them in our lives, but most of what it is to be a human being is to be slow, right? We live a long life. We have a maturational period that's quite long. We invest heavily in offspring, kin, friends, etc. Right? So my contention for you is that via this natural selection process, as revealed in things like signal detection, error management theory, pursuing slow goals, right? Avoiding disease, staying safe, mate retention, protecting family, stuff like that. Even me getting Pedro is part of this equation, right? It's a slow motive. So if you can figure out how the things that you do in your life track back to these slow motives, you might actually find even greater happiness, right? And you can double down on those, right? And so, um, in the end, I think that we can build a happier life if we understand the evolutionary psychology of happiness. Importantly, what we must get past is the very common idea that happiness predicts something else, right? Happy people do this. I mean, that's cool, that's clickbait, and that's lots of research in psychology. But what I think you should change in your mind is the order of operations. This is just like with self-esteem. There's a theory about self-esteem called the sociometer theory. And the sociometer theory says that when you feel a sense of inclusion in the world, right, self-esteem goes up. Why? Because self-esteem is an adaptation, a meter in your brain that says, I am being accepted by the social world. My brain gives me a reward for that because of all of the benefits and of course all of the downsides of not having it, of having social inclusion, for example. I will suggest to you as our closing note here that happiness is just a bigger example of the sociometer idea, right? We have a happyometer, right? Happiness is is a meter, a metric of our ability to satisfy those fundamental social motives. The degree to which we satisfy them, all of them, will reflect on us being happy or not, right? And so maybe you're good at some and not good at another. Maybe then you could identify, where is my life deficient? And maybe you don't need to go to a psychologist or a guru or yoga class. You can think about, okay, what have I worked out in my life of these 7 things, right? Have I worked them out enough? Have I not done it at all, for example, right? As you know, I'm single, so I have accomplished nothing on the mate side, but the status seeking side, right? I've done that, no problem. I'm avoiding diseases, all right. I go to the gym 6 days a week, et cetera, right? So if you can work out of these fundamental social motives where you're, let's say, deficient, you might actually be able to engage in behaviors that increase the probability of you being happier with your life, without any major intervention or interest or spending a whole $1 billion on the wellness industry. It might feel good to go do all these things that the wellness industry says, but we have to be skeptical about miraculous claims. Miraculous claims, as Carl Sagan put it, require miraculous evidence. So I hope this gave you some thought about what it is that we mean when we talk about happiness and what you might do to make your life happier in the end. All right? So that's it from me. Like, share, comment. Have a good day. Ciao.